It's time to wake up. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 5 years old, kindergarten or so, and I was always the runt of my age group. But in my neighborhood, there weren't any kids my age. Most of the kids were first, second, or older kids, if you will. And I just remember that day going out and playing, just like we did in the late 70s. You could go anywhere in the neighborhood, and this neighborhood was awesome. It was a new development where contractors would leave stuff behind, and there was all sorts of things that you could get in trouble with in those days, that day and age. And this day, my buddies invited me out, and they told me about this hole that they had found, that they had dug some tunnels, and that they wanted me to check it out. And so I willingly jumped on board and went with them and jumped down to this hole, was checking out all the tunnels that they had made. And they had created a little bench seat out of dirt and the mud and all that stuff. I mean, this thing was the coolest thing ever. And as I was checking it out, I noticed it started getting darker. And it was about that time that I realized that they were pulling a 4x8 sheet piece of plywood over my head and enclosing me in this hole. I immediately freaked out, as you can imagine, a 5-year-old stuck in a hole. And I began to scream, "Guys, don't do this, don't do this." And they left just like a little sliver where the sun could come through. And I just remember clawing at the walls of this little hole, trying to get out. And the dirt under my fingers becoming wet all of a sudden, turning into mud and splattering all over my face. And that smell was so humiliating. It was a humiliating moment that could have defined my life in a way that was negative. But thankfully, I had in my life at that time many people who saw in me something more than a kid, a runt. I had youth ministers, and I had great principals and teachers who thought I was just like this very outgoing, cool kid with great leadership opportunities and skills ahead. My parents were no different. They encouraged in me greatness. They instilled in me this idea that what we do in this life is we love people and we treat people well, no matter what they've done to us. If there's one thing I love about my upbringing, it was this whole church mentality of turning the other cheek. But I got to tell you that there came a point in my life where that moment began to haunt me more and more. Maybe you know about that kind of haunting. That thing that raises its head well down the road in your life. Or maybe it's always defined you. And maybe you're not relating to the kid in the hole, because I know that I too can also relate to the kids outside of the hole. That day set me on a plane to never want to be the kid in the hole again. And so I began to make friends with kids in all the categories that we have in high school. The nerds, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the gangsters. It didn't matter who you were. I wanted to make sure I had my hands in some sort of friendship in all those groups in order to protect myself so that I would never be the kid in the hole again. But that skill of learning how to relate and connect with people served me well alongside those who saw the leadership potential within me. And I began to establish within myself this identity of loving and caring for people. Many years down the road, I didn't realize that this was forming in me also a deep desire to understand who I really was. And that's when I began to understand and find how those things that happened to me as a child were still brewing and still stuck within me, creating in me a false reality of who I was. I was still going into relationships with this protective shell around me, expecting that I needed to protect myself from being peed on yet again. I would see this happening in relationships where I didn't feel necessarily worthy of the people that I was around. And I would sometimes find myself looking down on people in judgment because I also wanted to be the one who was outside of the hole always. And I would place on those folks that I thought lesser than me judgment. And I would create in them an identity that I didn't even want for myself. You see, this is the way the world is still operating. It's the reason why I am so passionate about helping people understand and discover the leader that is within each of you. You see, that bully that day was being led by yet someone else that was another bully. It could have been a parent. It could have been another kid at school. I don't know who it was, but he learned how to be that kid, that bully, that one that instigated that day. And his buddies, my buddies, who were there with him also, they were learning and following this guy who is being misguided in his leadership. And I, the little one, down underneath this 4x8 sheet of plywood, I too was being led that day, led to believe something horrific about myself. And I don't think anybody deserves that on any one of those levels. But instead, we need to become awakened and conscious of who we are following, first and foremost. You know, I've heard it said that we should be replacing or upgrading the level of people that we have in our friendships. And I get where that comes from, but I'm just going to call that out as that is just not true. You don't increase your level of people in order to leave people behind. What you do is you look to people who are leading well in order to begin to lead others that are behind you in a way that also elevates them. I have a tattoo on my arm that says Servus Servorum Dei, and it's Latin for servant of servants of God. You know, I've from an early, maybe not real early, but like 30s, I became very passionate about serving those who serve others because I believe that in that, you are lifting those up who ultimately are really serving a large majority of the people in our world. And I believe that it's our responsibility as human beings to be those servants for one another, humans serving humans. Because when we understand our role and our identity, not as that kid stuck in a hole or as the bully, but as the one who has an impact with every decision we make to change the world and to change the life of someone or somebody that has been in those kind of circumstances, we have an opportunity to truly begin to change the way we interact across the globe. War doesn't have to be the thing that drives us. Success at the devastation of others or the destruction of competitors doesn't have to be what drives us. But instead, it can be iron sharpening iron, the thing that ultimately creates each of us into being the truest and the best self that we can be. Because that is where we are called as humans, as people brought into this world to serve the whole of creation. And I know you hear me hammering this all the time, but the truth is this. You were created for greatness because only you can be you. You came into this world with a very defined purpose, and it's not the purpose of something necessarily grand or whatever that you think. It's not to outshine others. It is to outshine others in being you. Not letting them define you, not letting their labels define you, but you being you. I said it was hard growing up to be Leslie. And it's taken me a long time to ultimately be able to claim this with great pride and be proud of it. But my name Leslie, and then later on becoming, my parents always called me Les. And I, for a long time, really didn't love my name. But somewhere, something clicked. Sometime in my life, it clicked. I would introduce myself and I would say, my name is Les, and they would say, oh, hi, my name is Moore. It always drove me crazy. But then I began to hear an affirmation in it. Less is more. And not only is less more, but when I would introduce myself as Les and they would say, my name is Moore, it was something beautiful that happens in them. A smile would come across their face. A generous spirit would occur. And I used to laugh and poo-poo it, but now I embrace it. And I embrace who I am. And my only hope and my only passion in this life is really, truly to encourage you to embrace who you are, the true you. Don't let the world define you. You be you. You lead others to become their best self, and find others who encourage you to be you, to be your best self, to contribute to this world at the highest level, because we need you. Thanks, guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys on another day. Hope this was an encouragement. Be at peace. Have fun with the rest of your day. Peace.